Okay, well, it's a pleasure to be here. You're on mute. You're on mute.
I am,
Well,
yes. I'm happy to.
It has to be the quote of 2020. Don't worry, Richard. I mean, a number of times I end up saying that. But my challenge to all of you is, what if your fundraising is on mute? So before I get into the talk, we're going to have a question via the poll. So this is the question, and I assume Roger's going to help put this up to you. So how many of you over the course of, say, the end of March have, 1, reduced your fundraising, 2, stepped up your fundraising, or 3, kept it about the same? And by fundraising, I mean that proactive activity to engage donors. You know, I don't mean necessarily your income, because of course you could have landed some legacy or some large statutory grant. I do mean that sort of, you know, reaching out and stepping up your fundraising in that context. So that question's gone out.
And the poll is live.
So here, let's hear what you say.
I don't know whether everyone else can see it or not. Is there only me that can see it?
I can see it,
Richard.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll leave it in your hands then.
So I haven't seen the results come in yet. Can you close?
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah, no, I can see the results. It sounds like I'm the only person who can see the results. I could lie through my teeth on this, but I won't. I promise you. So we have about a quarter, 23% of people have said they've kept it the same. But then of the rest, it's heavily weighted in favour of stepped up fundraising. So 14% have said reduced fundraising, 63% have stepped up fundraising.
Okay, well, that's really encouraging. I mean, I thought it might be like a third, but it's good to see that it's weighted up into that area. Because there is a real danger, isn't there? I think there's a danger at this time that trustees or the senior team will make the mistaken assumption that people won't give, that it's prudent to cut back on fundraising as we need to reduce costs, and that it's not an appropriate time to ask. And I've heard all of those points being raised. And yet the reality seems to be the opposite, that people want to give or fundraises for causes they believe in right now. And we need to find a way to tap in to this rise in altruism. People want and need to feel good. And as the Mental Health Foundation highlights, doing good does you good. Now, of course, if you turn off your fundraising, if you stay on mute, then it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and don't be surprised if your income goes down. So if you're going to invest in fundraising, what should you do? Well, we believe you need to put the experience of your supporters at the heart of your strategy. The experience you provide supporters right now is something they're really going to remember. They're not going to forget, you know, this time. So I've been part of a volunteer group, a project with a Chartered Institute of Fundraising special interest group for the supporter experience, quite a mouthful. And the initiative thought about the question, how would you approach fundraising if you put the experience of your supporters front and foremost as your strategy? In essence, how can we make our supporters feel good at this difficult time for them? We nicknamed it Project X for short, as in experience. And it's building on thinking that some of you may be aware of, created from the Commission on the Donor Experience a few years ago. You'll find the outputs of that on Sophie, and your hosts, Richard and Roger, were very actively involved in many of its outputs. So after a lot of collaborative input from some wonderful fundraisers over the summer, a group of us have distilled down 6 principles to apply at this time. And all in all, I think approaching 100 people have collaborated on its output, from the tone to the design, and above all, the content and key messages. So think of it as a way to focus your thinking right now, because it's all too easy to panic and actually focus on the money. And I believe that's a mistake. I think it could lead to organisations doing the wrong actions. Let me give you an example. So a national charity I support, I won't name, but they've emailed its supporters asking them to no longer get their printed magazine to save costs and receive it online to help them save money. Now that sounds sensible from a financial perspective, but from a supporter experience perspective, I think that's the wrong call in my opinion, and I think it will kick back at them in time to come. Or perhaps communications which say, we can't do this event, we have less income due to shops closing and trading, please donate. Again, focus on the money, but no real mention of the mission and how this is all affecting your mission. So we have 6 principles. Each of the 6 principles should help you determine that right course of action to take at this time. And to help for each principle, we have added 33 actions, so 5 or 6 per principle, that are relevant to the current scenario of a further lockdown as a result of a second wave of COVID-19. And we actually developed actions for several scenarios. And then when it became clear we were heading for a new lockdown, we focused on one scenario. And then the final, but really critical element was we added examples. And this is what really brought it alive for me. Speaking to fundraisers who have been successfully adapting their fundraising since March and leading by example. I'm not going to repeat the report. Please do read it. It will take you 30 minutes. And I reread it this week, even to check that that's the time. So make yourself a coffee or whatever you fancy and sit and work it through. And to help you get into it, you could even watch a webinar that we recorded yesterday. It's shortly going to be available on the Chartered Institute of Fundraising's YouTube channel. And that's probably worth an hour of your time. I think 1,500 people registered to view that. And it has speakers from each of those examples and touches on the principles. But I'm going to highlight 3 takeouts, if you like, that stood out for me during its creation. I'll reference some of the examples, which go into much more detail in both the booklet and the webinar. So the first was an insight on where do you start? What do you say? And what seemed to be a reoccurring theme is simply getting to know your supporters and how they are feeling. So simply start by talking to your supporters. And the examples I'll give you, you'll find them in the report. So Starlight Children's Foundation, Rachel Dorey shares how the results of a supporter survey at the outset of the lockdown really helped them over this period. So in particular, they wanted to know the why of supporters, why they chose to donate to Starlight. And the results of this survey helped them reflect and ask the question, are we saying the right things? And it helped them actually adapt their messaging, even to the extent of the thanking they had. They started to involve families in passing thanks on to donors, and it had a remarkable impact. And it sort of motivated everybody there. But in their words, their repeat giving completely blew our minds. It had that sort of effect. Zoom calls. Have you used them to engage supporters? The charity Child Rescue Nepal have several times. So following a communication, asking supporters how they were and offering the opportunity for a chat, they invited supporters to a Zoom meeting. And at the meeting, supporters could introduce themselves. And on the Zoom was staff based in Nepal. Now, it was a simple but a really effective way to bring supporters closer to the mission. Afterwards, they received a grant donation from a foundation who hadn't given for over a year. The son of a corporate supporter who joined the Zoom was so inspired, he did a fundraiser running the height of Everest. Now, of course, they've never done Zoom calls with supporters before, but they gave it a go. Now, some of you may be saying, oh, well, we just haven't got the capacity. Child Rescue Nepal is led by the chief executive and one other member of staff in the UK. That is it. So it's that mindset of, let's do this, it's important. They just had a BBC radio appeal broadcast in August. I believe it's one of the best this year. And that is really saying something, as I'll come on to later on. So engage your supporters, listen to them, and you will get the clues for how to communicate to them will emerge. And the very process of engaging them will also lead to support. They're going to value you are thinking about them. You are still thinking about them because it simply says you value them. And then the third thing that everyone can do is simply think about them. Just put yourself in their shoes. I'm going to share a Christmas appeal that's going out at the end of this talk, and you'll get a sense of how the organisation has just stopped to think about their supporters and adapt their appeal as a result. So the second big takeout is this: at least give people the opportunity to give. And that's perhaps the sort of overarching message from the guide that we've created, and perhaps the most important. So of the 6 principles, principle 3 is this: your supporters still believe in your mission and they want to give. How would your supporters feel if you had to cut back on your work and you hadn't communicated the issues you're now facing? And it made me realise, and I've been fundraising for a bit, that the ask is really part of the experience. It taps into that basic emotion that is sparked within us when someone says, will you please help me? It communicates they need help. You know, just think about it when you ask that question, what it initiates in you as a listener. So Sam Affin, the fundraiser from Freedom from Torture, he shares how they stopped to consider, should they ask? And the response, they thought, well, if we don't ask now, when? Freedom of Torture work with asylum seekers who are isolated at the best of times. And they had a campaign all lined up called Spare a Fiver, but it just didn't feel right to go ahead. And it was during an internal Zoom meeting, someone said, well, at this time, everyone's doing what they can. And Sam says that was the hair on the back of the neck moment. So the Do What We Can appeal was launched. In one day, it raised more than the previous year did in 6 weeks. Their supporters loved it. Retention has even improved, and they've had the fastest growth in new supporters for years. Now, another example I really admire is the approach taken by Asthma UK. Now, for a while, they've had an idea to ask people to give as a result of the advice they provide. A bit like the Wikipedia or the ask you get if you read The Guardian online. You know, have you valued this information? Will you support us? But they hadn't gone ahead with this idea until COVID came. And then they had an 8-fold increase on phone calls to the helpline. Now, I'm an asthma sufferer, and I'd noticed a switch at least before COVID, when Asthma UK, they switched away from asking me always a sort of fundraising money ask to giving me really valuable advice. Really wonderful emails from the in-house doctor, Dr. Andy, and they would get my attention far more. How to use my inhaler, how to reduce asthma at Christmas time. Christmas trees can be a problem. I never knew that. And then there would be, you know, they would perhaps tag that in the email with other things like opportunity to maybe run the London Marathon. But now with the increase in demand on their service, they went ahead with the idea that they'd put off to have an ask when people went online for advice. And the result was, in their words, quite phenomenal. And it's already become the 4th biggest income generator. And they've applied the same principle with the British Lung Foundation, who they've merged with. Now, of course, throughout this time, they continue to give really good plain speaking advice. And so while the ask is part of the experience, don't forget that the other parts are critical too. The experience of giving, exceptional donor care immediately afterwards, and the ongoing stewardship. So if you've ever needed an excuse to ramp these up, this is the time. And they all add to the feel-good experience, which leads me to my third observation. It's this: demand for our product has gone up. Demand for your product has increased. Well, what do you mean? What is our product? Well, I mean fundraising. So when someone has an emotional reaction and chooses to support a cause, it can generate those feel-good natural chemicals of dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin if the fundraiser is doing their job. That's what they look like, according to my daughter, who's studying biology. That's your product, helping people feel good. Now, those feel-good chemicals can all be released by fundraisers to grateful donors. So a fundraiser is a chemical agent. Hence, it is appropriate to ask. And if we do it well and follow through gratefully as a result of someone donating or fundraising for our cause, we are improving their health. That's a really nice way to think about it. So I wanted to go back to the BBC. The BBC have an appeal each week on Radio 4. It's a huge range of charities covering a wide range of issues, some working internationally and of all sizes. Many smaller ones are often featured. It's perhaps one of the best ways we can make a simple comparison. How have charities fared compared to 2019? And the results seem to suggest something remarkable. Now, I know the BBC team have done really great work training charities to prepare a strong story to broadcast in recent years. They often get fundraisers in to talk about what they did. And I'm sure that's having an impact. 2019 was one of their best years for their weekly radio appeals, raising over $1 million. But if you compare the results for the first 3 months of lockdown, they are triple compared to previous years. An average of 45,000 per appeal versus 14,000. And whilst this effect is trailing off, the BBC radio producer responsible for the weekly appeal, who I spoke to last week, completely concurs with me. There is definitely a sense that altruism is on the rise. And as if you read the post by Sophie, you know, their observation is, are donations going through the floor or are they going through the roof? It's also playing out in results elsewhere. Some of the best communications I've seen this year have come from the RNLI lifeboats. Perhaps you've heard of the reference to We Are One Crew, the message they put out at the start of the lockdown. That was them talking to their supporters. This is what one supporter said in response: "I can't tell you how much it meant to hear your words and feel your support." Feel your support. Isn't that wonderful? And then they gave the opportunity to give. This was their summer appeal. It's a summer like no other. Calls for help increasing our income falling because they had areas cut back, and your donation vital. And effectively, they were recognizing demand for their product was up, and it comes as no surprise they were getting the results. Warm appeals consistently passing targets. And they've really stepped up. Their confidence has grown over this time. They've been doing cold door drops, and they're getting results that you would have expected in days gone by. They're making a net gain, and they already have, from an August door drop. They're just preparing their Christmas appeal, and this is where they've been thinking about their supporters. They're going to do a Christmas appeal because we know everyone is thinking about their families. And so the appeal is from the families of volunteers, RNLI volunteers, saying, thank you, donors, for ensuring my father, my mother, my son, my daughter have the best equipment possible when they go out into the seas during these months. But that's the RNLI, you might say. And whilst they're not in the midst of the thick of COVID, you know, clearly they are a well-established fundraising outfit. How about the Royal Highland Show, which was of course cancelled this year? They're getting an average donation from an appeal to their members of £200 to ensure future shows go on and on. Further afield, SolarAid, who I used to work with and consistently sort of check in with, the moment of sunshine appeal was one of its best. And that was bringing lights to health centres in Malawi and Zambia. So causes of all sizes and all issues achieving something remarkable. Which leads me to reflect on this. Altruism is like water. And once it begins to flow, it's going to find a course. People are going to find a way to feel good. But if you don't offer them the opportunity, if your fundraising is on mute, they will seek it elsewhere. And maybe not even another charity. I gather there's been an uptake of chocolate since March, certainly in our household. And if you're running a business and the demand of your product was rising, what would you do? You would up your marketing. Hey, over here, we can supply this for you. And in attracting new or returning customers, you'd be sure to make the product met, even exceeds expectations, and that you put in place customer care to cope with the rising demand. So they're going to buy again and or recommend you and leave great customer reviews to help attract even more custom. The same applies for your supporters and potential supporters. So invest in your fundraisers, that's principle 5, and invest in fundraising, principle 6. To really appreciate, please go and read them all. So I know the full funding picture is more complicated. Grants might be difficult to draw on if work can't take place. Trading income will have been hit if shops can't open, and events need to be completely rethought. But as the Royal Air Force Association share in the booklet, even cancelled events do amazingly well if you can harness the energy of supporters. So despite these difficulties, is it not heartening that fundraising at its purest, people giving donations and fundraising for causes that matter to them, will rise to the challenge? And my conclusion from being part of this project is altruism, in my opinion, is on the rise. That's what even the evidence seems to suggest. And the fundraiser is the interface between your cause and supporters, both existing and potential. But bad fundraising won't deliver what people need. Good fundraising that responds to the needs of supporters, gives them a great experience, will do really well. It will harness this rise in altruism. And if there's one lesson I have learned since March, it is this: good fundraising times rising altruism equals fundraising magic. And from a maths perspective, if good fundraising equals 0, you won't get any fundraising magic. So ask, how can you add value to supporters? That's what the fundraiser does. You're needed more than ever. Now, it would be great if we lived in a world where people just gave. We fundraisers weren't needed, funded by taxes, but people need to give. And many don't just give without being moved to do so in some way. There is something that sparks them. And again, that's part of the experience. The ask is part of the experience. So we need to ask and make it an experience all the way through that they enjoy. One they're going to remember, so they're going to be back for more. Not only will you raise money right now, but by giving people a great experience, they will continue to do so for many years to come. So finally, some to-dos for you. 1, please check out the report, search or Google Supporter Experience, CIOF, Chartered Institute of Fundraising. 2, watch the webinar. There were 1,500 that signed up yesterday to the webinar, but we'll put it on the Chartered Institute of Fundraising YouTube channel in due course. It'll help you get into the report. And finally, please share both so we can help as many who may be struggling at this time to harness that wave of altruism and that good fundraising can catch. I'm just going to end my share. So that should hopefully help you on why focusing on the supporter experience is going to help you fundraise successfully right now.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Richard. Always a pleasure to listen to you, to hear your stories, your insights, and some great advice and tips there. Thanks very much. We're quite short on time, but I had a burning question I wanted to ask because there's so much in there. I mean, admittedly, yes, when we produced the commission, there were 500 plus recommendations, and you've managed to create 33 now, which is far more focused. But even that's quite a lot. So, what would step 1 be? if you're at a charity and you're not doing all of this already, what's the first thing after you've read the report and watched the webinar? What are the first things operationally you should be doing?
I think it's sort of checking that your senior team understand this. And, you know, that's partly why we produce something in a way that you could perhaps say, you know, have a look at this. And here are other organizations, you know, getting them on board. So you're not fighting back at that, and that they understand actually that there is I suppose, an opportunity, for want of a better way. And we, you know, the Commission on the Donor Experience, all of that content's still valid. We just know people are short of time, hence we distilled it right down into the things that we think are really relevant at this particular time.
That's absolutely key. And again, I'm going to ask the same question again. So yes, absolutely, check the senior team can understand this, and often that's easier said than done. What are the best ways of getting in front of them to make it important?
Well, I guess it comes down, I mean, the key thing obviously is whatever issue you do, your problem has just got bigger, almost certainly. And that, you know, that's at the heart of what trustees and so on, you know, want to deal with. So it's helping understand, you know, if we reach out to our supporters and communicate that, the way that the problem has changed, not the fact we've got less income because of whatever, you know, for whatever reasons, you know, they are going to want to respond. And so it's thinking, how do you communicate that powerfully, and give people the opportunity to support? And I'd really recommend just reach out and talk to supporters. It gives you confidence. You just need one anecdote, one story to tell up the line, and that can really change a meeting, as opposed to sort of assumptions that people go, oh no, it's not the right time to ask, it's inappropriate. So I really recommend, you know, engaging people, and it will give you confidence as well.
Excellent. So I've put a link to the report. I did put it in the Q&A, but there's for some reason it's not a hyperlink, so you can't actually click on it. So I've put it in the chat as well. So if anybody's looking for a link to the report, it's in the chat, which you should be able to find in the sort of the menu bar at the bottom of your screen.
And it's well worth reading. And I have to confess, Richard, I watched the first half of the webinar yesterday and then had to go on to something else. But what I took from both the report and the webinar is there's some just really practical ideas in there. People just talking about, this is what we did. And that's what this should be. That's what I'm really pleased to have seen in that, and also what you're talking about today. Very practical things that people can take away and do.
Yeah, it's pragmatic, and it sort of builds on what was all done before as well, which, you know, made it so much easier to do. We're just going to edit it just to make it a little bit cleaner, and then we'll get it up on the Institute's YouTube channel.
That's brilliant. That's awesome. That's fantastic. Once again, thank you so much for your time, Richard, giving you time for today, and for everything you're doing for the special interest group as well. Thank you so much.
You're really welcome.
And can we see your T-shirt?
Yes.
There you go. It's one of the older T-shirts. Bit of smile for a donor.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Love it. Good times. Good times.
All right. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Richard.